Hey guys, so in this video I'm reviewing operations with complex numbers. Before we start talking about complex numbers, we need to recall two things: imaginary numbers and then complex. Starting with imaginary, imaginary numbers are always in the form bi. So it could just be I, or it could be something times I. Remember that I, the imaginary number, is the same as the square root of -1. But that's a lot to write, so we write it as I. That being said, I squared is going to be the square root of -1 times this, or squared. So that's the same as -1. I cubed is the same as -1 times I, so it's -I. And I to the fourth is I squared times I squared, so that equals 1. So you should know these four. Complex numbers are in the form A plus bi. So the difference between imaginary and complex is imaginary is just like I or something times I, and then complex numbers is this whole number because it's I plus a real number. So we're going to start by talking about how to add and subtract complex numbers. Alright, so we're going to start with an example. Simplify. So we'll do adding first. 5 minus 3i plus -2 plus 4i. So if you remember from Algebra 2, adding is just like adding with x's. So you're just going to combine like terms. So we have a 5 minus 2, which is 3. And then we have a -3i plus 4i, so that's going to be plus I, and we are done. Subtracting is a little bit harder or trickier. I should say trickier instead of harder. So if we have 10 minus 2i minus 14 minus 6i, the thing to be careful about, as always, is the negative. So you need to distribute this negative first. So I would bring down the 10 minus 2i and then change this to minus 14 plus 6i. Then you can combine like terms. So 10 minus 14 is -4, and then -2i plus 6i is positive 4i, and that's our final complex number. Next is multiplying complex numbers. So multiplying is pretty straightforward, easy even. So this is example 2. Again, simplify. And let's just do one example. 2 minus 3i times 7 minus 4i. So when you're multiplying, you're just going to double distribute. So 2 times 7, 14. 2 times -4i, -8i. -3i times 7, -21i. And -3 times -4i is going to be positive 12i squared. So first thing we should do is combine our like terms. So -8i minus 21i will be -29i. And then you need to remember what we did on the other page. I squared is the same as -1. So this isn't going to be positive 12, it's going to be -12. which you can actually go straight to writing it as minus 12. And now we can combine our 14 minus 12, which is 2. And we're left with 2 minus 29i. And that's it. So the thing when multiplying to be careful of is going to be those I squareds, and remembering it's the same as -1. The last thing that we need to talk about or review is rationalizing a complex number, or divide. So if I give you a problem, say simplify again, something like 5 minus 3i divided by 1 minus 2i. So first of all, you should rewrite this as a fraction. And the thing is, we don't want complex numbers in the denominator, or anything irrational for that matter. So what we need to do is multiply by the complex conjugate. I'll write that off on the side. So the complex conjugate is going to always be the same real number, so 1, and then opposite imaginary, so 1 plus 2i. So real quick, if you had like, I don't know, 6 minus 2i, the complex conjugate is going to be 6 plus 2i. If you had 72 plus 63i, complex conjugate is 72 minus 63i. Anyways, so the reason we need to multiply by the conjugate is we're trying to get I out of the denominator. We don't want it to be complex. We don't want it to be imaginary. So we do 1 times 1, which is 1. 1 times 2i, which is positive 2i. And then negative 2i times 1. And then negative 2i times positive 2i, which is 4i squared. So we need to do the same in the numerator, so 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 2i is, oops, 10i, negative 3 times I, negative 3i, and negative 3 times 2i is negative 6i squared. So now we can combine like terms. So starting in the numerator, we have 5. 10 minus 3i is going to be 7i. And then this, because I squared is the same as negative 1, is going to become plus 6. In our denominator, you'll see that these cancel, which we did intentionally by multiplying by the complex conjugate. And then positive 4i squared is going to become minus 4. And then we just need to combine like terms one more time. 5 plus 6 is 11. And 1 minus 4 is negative 3. All right. So I just realized that I totally messed up in the beginning, and because I'm not actually talking in front of people, no one could tell me. But this should be a minus 4i squared, because negative 2 times positive 2 is negative 4i, which changes this to be plus 4, which changes this to be positive 5. But I believe that that is the only spot I messed up, so that is going to be our final answer. So the thing with complex conjugates, or just dividing and rationalizing the denominator, is making sure you multiply by the complex conjugate, which means that 2 of your imaginary numbers will disappear. But be careful when you distribute your numerator. Make sure you distribute it to everything.